So let's bring in our panel. Jonathan Turley, George Washington University law professor and constitutional law attorney, Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, and Bill McGurn, Wall Street Journal columnist, all are Fox News contributors. Kevin Walling, former Biden campaign surrogate and Democratic strategist. Really good to have all of you with us today. So we've all had a chance to absorb some of this. We've gotten some more reporting from inside the courtroom about the questions that the judge was asking. And I thought it was very interesting, Jonathan, I'll start with you if I may, that she said, so what are you guys doing? You're still investigating. He said, yes, we are still investigating. And he said, I can't tell you what we're investigating, because, we can't divulge that in the courtroom right now in front of, I imagine, in front of one of the subjects. But she said, could it be FARA? Are you looking into whether or not they were registered as foreign agents? Because she had just had him lay out, who did you work for, by the way? Burisma and the Chinese energy company. So what do you make of what we're now learning in all of this, Jonathan?
Well, Martha, it's extremely rare. I mean, this is like a wedding where the minister asks, does anyone object? And both the groom and bride object.
That's a great analogy.
It's just weird, because usually you work these things out in advance, but the judge has an obligation to make sure that the defendant and the government have a very clear idea of what is implicated here, what is guaranteed here. And they clearly didn't have that agreement. And one of the reasons I think they didn't is because this was a sweetheart deal. I mean, this was an effort to sort of cap off this case. But now it's the worst possible situation for Hunter Biden. He's in a position now where he doesn't have any protection at all, and the Department of Justice is in a position where they can bring any and all of the remaining counts, including FARA, and they usually do. Usually when a defendant goes south on a plea agreement, the Department of Justice puts everything on the table for a potential trial, and that would mean a real chance of jail time.
Yeah. One of the things, Andy, that strikes me here, I think that's a great analogy that Jonathan just made about, the bride and the groom, that there are objections on both sides. So I guess one of my questions is what's going on here in the Department of Justice, especially given the scrutiny that they've been put under. Do you sense that there is any sort of change in their posture because they, have come out of all of this looking pretty bad?
Well, no one likes to look bad. I like Jonathan's analogy, except I thought he was going to say it was the minister who objected, because I think that's kind of what happened in the courtroom today. Yeah. Look, I think what happened here is they were trying to do a political exercise and they got caught. The reason it's a sweetheart deal, and one of the things about a sweetheart deal is it departs from the normal deal in that you don't lay out what all the understandings are, because if you did, then the public would get very angry at what the government was doing. So what they did was, in a kind of elliptical way, lay out that Hunter could plead guilty to these 2 tax charges, and that would cover him not only for other tax charges, but his understanding was going to be that the whole case was wrapped up, that any facts that you could extrapolate out of these transactions, if there were crimes from that, he had immunity. And of course, the Biden Justice Department doesn't want to say that, because that would be politically damaging and humiliating. So when they got called on it, they said, of course, yes, there's a continuing investigation, and no, he doesn't have immunity. They didn't think they were going to get called on it. What they expected was they would have their understanding of the agreement, and if they were ever asked about it, they would be able to say, there's a continuing investigation, we can't comment on that. Hunter would go off and say he was completely immunized and the case was closed, and that would be the end of it. And they needed a judge who would rubber stamp that, and they didn't get it.
Yeah, they didn't get it. Bill McGurn is from Saul Weissenberg today, who was deputy independent counsel for Whitewater and Lewinsky in that case. And he puts it this way. Think about this. DOJ was about to sanction a plea deal where Hunter would get misdemeanor probation on serious tax charges, plus pre-trial diversion, no time served or criminal record, on a felony gun charge. Hunter would also get complete immunity on all other charges, and he would not have to cooperate with the government's ongoing investigation. Totally disgraceful, he says. Merrick Garland and David Weiss should be ashamed. Bill McGurn, your reaction to that?
Oh, I agree entirely. Look, this plea deal depended on no one asking any real questions. It's amazing to me that it's dissolved on the minimum of cross-examination. And it kind of had to. You know, Justice couldn't say that they were ending all charges. They had to say it was ongoing, because also that's what David Weiss and Merrick Garland used not to answer questions from Congress. So I think it makes it a lot harder. And I think Hunter Biden, of course, is a real loser immediately. But I think Joe Biden is a big loser down the road. Every day, there's more and more information from Congress casting doubt in his claims, the kind of Sergeant Schultz defense, I know nothing about Biden. And on Monday, we're apparently going to hear from Devin Archer, one of Hunter's business partners, that the president, that Joe was on the speakerphone with some of Biden's business partners. So I think it becomes unsustainable. The White House is still not accepting reality. They've been let off the hook so far by few reporters are willing to press them. And today, Kevin Jean-Pierre tried to use the old defense, the president loves his son, it's a personal issue. No, it's not. It's a public issue. The question, two big questions are, was Joe Biden in on his son's sleazy deals? And did his appointees, particularly at Justice Department, intervene to prevent people from getting to the truth?
Yeah, I mean, if that is the case, if there was pressure from the White House on these investigations, and that's essentially, Kevin Walling, what the whistleblowers said. They said, we were told to back off. We were told not to ask questions about the big guy. We were told not to do anything that would, suggest any tie to the president here. That's not the way investigations are run. That's not what the American people expect. That's not the kind of treatment they get if they're dragged into behavior that could be criminal here. So I guess my question for you as a Democrat strategist is, how do you view this? How problematic is this for a candidate who already has very low approval numbers going into this race?
Well, Martha, number one, it's good to be with you. Number two, it's certainly a headache for this administration. And there's both, obviously, a political dynamic and a legal dynamic playing out. I don't think Hunter Biden has been well served by his legal team. To Jonathan's point at the outset, the fact that there was so much ambiguity going into this plea agreement didn't serve Hunter well and didn't serve the government well. So there's a lot of egg on both the Justice Department's face and on Hunter Biden's team. And that's why I think, Martha, it's so important that we hear from David Weiss, that he comes before Congress, testifies under oath. Merrick Garland has already agreed, the Attorney General, to allow David Weiss to come before Congress to answer these questions and to clear up a lot of the questions, both from Democrats and Republicans, about how this process is played out.
Yeah. To my other question, though, how does it stack up politically as you look towards this 2024 election, which is already, a bit of an uphill battle, given the approval numbers that the president has? And this was asked all the time during all of the Trump investigations, which are ongoing. Is it, at some point, is it too much to deal with?
Yeah, Martha, I don't think it's too much in that, you've got to make sure that the White House is focused. The president's going to Maine this week, for example, talking about infrastructure, talking about the economy. So you've got that political track playing out with the American people. But certainly this is a distraction in terms of actually getting the message out. And there's a lot of challenges with regards to the complexities of this case. And the American people fundamentally see, Hunter Biden, see corruption, and oftentimes will tie that to Joe Biden, even though we've not seen under testimony any, you've got that 1023 form that has, been talked about widely on this network and others, but you haven't seen that concrete evidence yet linking the president to Hunter Biden in this issue.
Before I let you go, Kevin, then let me ask you this question. If you've read this, no doubt, so if Devin Archer testifies that over 24 times the phone was put on the table in the middle of these meetings with Ukrainian leaders of Burisma during a time when they were trying to get scandal off their back, that the Biden as vice president Biden was involved in, does that change that for you? Is that a direct connection if he was brought into those meetings? Because he said all the time that he had no knowledge.
Well, certainly, Martha, I'd like to see the evidence presented by David Archer if he's going to make that case. You have that 11023 form with a phone conversation that was recorded by an FBI informant. A lot of that has been recounted by that Burisma executive. So there are a lot more of questions in terms of the fundamental nature of these specific charges as it relates to then Vice President Biden. I'd like to see the evidence, not just hearsay, from some of these whistleblowers.
Well, you've got whistleblowers, you've got the 1023, and now you've got Devin Archer, and you also have Tony Bobolinsky. So it's becoming, a pretty compelling crowd. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll see where this goes. Good to have all of you today.
Thanks, Martha.
Great coverage throughout all of this today. Thank you all.